YouTube world, thank you for joining me again for another Animosaurus interview. Today I'm very lucky to have with me Luke Harris, who's the driving force behind the DLF community here in Brisbane. Luke, welcome and thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much, Kim.
This is here we are sitting back on a Sunday. We're both in our studios, so it's quite funny to think that we don't really stop working.
I mean that's the life, isn't it? It's kind of like that. I think even when we are relaxing, it's basically like just work with a cup of tea. That's our definition of an afternoon off.
Yeah, relaxing day. You've got your cup. Oh, I got my water bottle, so I'm staying good. Stay hydrated. All right, for anyone who's never met you before, Luke, can you just wrap up where you've come from and how you've got it up landed here in Brisbane?
Yeah, sure. Look, I came down to Brisbane from Cairns when I started university back in 2004. And then through various university degrees, kind of worked out that I wanted to move into the sort of creative industries using some kind of moving towards film, basically. And then I discovered Video Copilot. And of course, as many motion designers do, you just start learning how to make heads explode, and then suddenly you start making, words and graphics move around the screen for clients. And then, I put together a portfolio, ended up on a television show down in Sydney. And then started working in broadcast design, moved into freelance work in that world, and then came back to Brisbane, started my own studio, taught a little bit, and then realized that I think I'd like to move more into directing. And currently I'm now directing 3D animation at a studio called Pixel Zoo up in North Lakes, and really, really loving it up there.
Cool, excellent. Yeah, that's a pretty quick overview of everything that's gone on.
Yeah, it's so hard because like as soon as you start getting old, it's like, oh yeah, there's a lot of years in there. I gotta.
Yeah, cause I mean, you covered that you kind of you came down from the lovely land of the top of Australia, but you also did travel down to Sydney for a while as well, and you've seen the life down there and what it's like. So what brought you back to Brisbane? Was it family? Was it projects? Or what brought you back to Brisbane?
Yeah, really interesting. So being in Sydney, I found it really exhilarating. There's a lot of great work happening down there. The people are amazing. The lifestyle, it was tough to kind of imagine having children down there. For one, because it's super expensive. Two, none of our families down there.
Yeah.
So basically, around about the time my wife and I were thinking about having kids, we sort of looked around and was like, okay, well, all of our family is in Queensland. We're probably going to want to, like, my parents were in the process of moving down from Cairns to Brisbane at around about that time. So it all just started adding up. Like, Brisbane was a good place to kind of just settle down for a while and make a home for ourselves up here.
Yeah, it is a beautiful spot for a home because that's we're similar sort of thing. I was down in Sydney as well when we started thinking about family too. So yeah, we've ended up with the support network that my wife's got up here. It's like, well, why are we in Sydney without anyone else around us to help out? So
it's pretty much yeah. It's funny, like growing up, I had no sort of extended family close to me because both my dad and my mum moved to Cairns, and all of my relatives were around the world basically. And when I came to Brisbane and met my wife's family, it was the first time I'd sort of experienced what it was like to be in a familial support environment. Like, my parents are great, but like it's fascinating to then have grandparents and uncles and aunties and cousins and everything in the same city. And I was like, this is something we should probably try and work towards.
wow. So yeah, so you've travelled around, you've seen quite a lot, and ended up back in Brisbane. When did you get into Brisbane?
After being in Sydney.
Yeah. What sort of year was that?
So we spent 2009, 2010-ish in Sydney, and then spent a year over in Fiji, which we can come back to, but then ended up back in Brisbane in 2011.
Oh.
probably towards the end, really, we started getting back into the swing of things, and I had a few jobs going, and started thinking about, who's in Brisbane that I can work with.
Ah, cool. Was that then the time that when you got back, 2011? When did you start getting involved with the DLF then?
Look, I mean, the DLF was actually something that I'd been exposed to while I was in Sydney. So a lot of the guys that I work with down there, I was like, how do you guys actually like find jobs? And they're like, oh, usually it's people you know, or there's this list. There's this email list called the DLF. And I'm like, what the heck is the DLF? And they explained that it was like this email list with a really obscure name run by this amazing lady who taught at AFTRS down in Sydney, named Kip Devine. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's random. So what actually happens? They're like, you just sign up, and she sends around all of these jobs that get sent to her, basically. And I'm like, that's amazing. Okay, sweet. Sign me up. I'll check that out. And, got a few jobs through there, met a few good people through the community sort of stuff that was happening in Sydney. And then realized that kind of stuff wasn't kind of happening as much back in Brisbane.
Yeah. So when you got back, around that time, did you start thinking about building up the community, or was it something that you were just like, it's just missing, I just want to start actually being involved?
Look, it could have been a combination of like me being just back in town and I was a little bit new. And also I'd really only gotten to know the motion design and animation community down in Sydney. So I had no way of kind of entering that world in Brisbane. I started to like reach out to people that I did know, and slowly started to build connections between people that I'd known from before I'd moved down to Sydney. But there didn't seem to be sort of any central meeting place. Pretty much the closest thing was Rangi Sutton, who seemed to, be the stalwart of the Brisbane visual effects industry. But yeah, apart from the occasional drinks that he was able to sort of pull together on the old DLF mailing list, there wasn't sort of like a central hub of people who did motion graphics and animation and things like that.
Yeah, so there's no regular meetups or anything like that was sort of happening at that point when you got back here again.
Yeah, it didn't seem to be. It might have just been my ignorance, but it did feel a little bit isolated once I came back up here.
So from that, did you then go, did you make a conscious choice to then say, I want to be involved, I want to start bringing people together? Or how did you then go about to getting things to happen?
So it's a bit of a long answer, unfortunately. It's a combination of like I've always enjoyed bringing people together. Like there's always been a great moment where you put two amazingly creative people together and they spark, and great things happen. So I've always enjoyed that. I've always enjoyed meeting new people. I've always enjoyed putting events together. But it didn't really click until, a few years ago that I started seeing what was kind of happening down in Melbourne. I don't know if you ever saw, but, I just started seeing these little events popping up in the DLF mailing list. Mr. Jamie Dunbar was like, oh, yeah, there's this happening this month, and then there's this happening this month, and look, we've got a speaker happening this month. And I'm like, man, that sounds like a really, really good thing. So I reached out to Jamie, and you've spoken to Jamie, and you know how like just a ridiculously nice person he is. So he was kind enough to sort of talk me through how he organizes things and what his aims were. And I'm like, man, that's great. I wish we had something like that up in Brisbane. And he's like, well, it's not that hard. And I'm like, I suppose it's not too hard. Yeah, look, I'll give it a shot. So with his help, I sort of organized the first one up in Brisbane. He was lovely enough to sort of help me organize something with some sponsors as well. And then that sort of was the kick that I needed to make sure that things started happening regularly. And as soon as the first event happened, I'm like, yes, this is something that I really like doing and I want to do more of.
Yeah. Ah, cool. And how long ago was that you that kind of penny dropped, I guess you'd say?
Probably about 2.5 years.
Ah,
two and a half years. Yeah. So it was around about like 2018 that we knew that it wanted to be like we wanted it to happen. Yep. But it wasn't until I think very late in 2018 that we started, and then 2019 was our sort of more consistent year.
Yeah. Yeah, because
before 2020 came and punched us in the face.
yeah, it's kind of done that for a lot of social events. It's just like, nah, we've killed it. But I mean, the thing with, well, you know, even through 2020 now, the DLF has still been pretty active. You know, we've just gone, I've seen a lot of the guys have just gone online, and we actually get the online gatherings, which I think has been quite an interesting development as to the way that the community's been able to stay in touch. Through that time, through the last 2 years, then, have you got any events which really stick in your mind as being ones which go, man, that was such a great one that we've had?
Oh yeah, no, totally. Like the first one we did with Bradley Coomer. He's an amazing guy with an amazing story. But I didn't quite know what kind of a demand there would be in Brisbane for an event. So we actually thought, oh, look, it's just the first one. We'll organize something small. We'll try and get like a little, just a small intimate event happening. And then we put it out there, and immediately within a day, there was like 80 people buying. Buying. It was a free ticket, but 80 people signing up. And I'm like, okay, I've drastically underestimated how many people want to actually meet up in Brisbane. We need to think bigger. So we found like a very small cinema. We managed to book that out for the night, along with the bar just outside. And it ended up being something like 90 people turning up to this very small cinema that stands out in my mind as like, okay, look, not only is there a hunger for meeting up and hearing from people within the industry, people will show up. So that will always just stick in my head.
Yeah, that's always the thing, especially with free events. It's just like a lot of people can get free event tickets, but then just on the night, it's like, do they actually show up? It's like, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But yeah, it's really exciting to see that the events do get traction, especially. And since then, the community's still been fairly active. You know, it's not like a big boom. It's still like people are still turning up to events now, which is great. So.
Yeah. I think like the lowest it's been was around about like 35, 40 people, which is still a decent room full when you think about it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, depends on where it's held. It could be bursting outside the walls. It's like
Exactly.
So where do you see this community going? Because it is something that's, you know, it's been around the Australian industry for, you know, longer than I've been involved in it. I know the DLF's been around that long. Where do you see the community in Brisbane here going?
That's an interesting one. I mean, one of the good things about Brisbane is that you basically know everybody. But sometimes like we can become a little bit internally focused, in that like, okay, so we're doing stuff for Australia, or we're only focusing on this small little bubble that we're in. I'd love to sort of, just take any chance we get to remind ourselves that, like, we operate in a global sphere now. We have Bluey that's winning Emmys. We've got lots of different companies doing work for everywhere around the globe. Basically, we've got heaps of movies shooting down here in the Gold Coast now. So anything that can help us remember that we're not just Brisbane. We are, we're very, very connected with the rest of the world, and we're operating on that stage. I think that's what I'd love to do, is just sort of help people remember that you guys are part of an awesome global community.
The other thing which I kind of really wanted to talk to you about, especially recently, is the Unreal, like your journey through the Unreal pitch, because I know you've put a pitch forward. What are your thoughts about what Unreal have kind of done, in this time where they've just gone, you know what, we want to see a lot of film artists create films with the Unreal Engine. I just want to get your thinking about how you think that sort of fits within this time that we've got, and how you went about, putting together a pitch to actually go, we're after something, I've got an idea to build.
Oh, that's a tough question. There's a lot of questions within that one question.
There is.
Well, let's start big. Like, I think we're in a time that is, it's pretty darn exciting. You know what I mean? Like, people always talk about the singularity, but there is a really big convergence happening between like stuff that we would normally, have to wait days to see the result of, and stuff that's now able to be seen immediately. Like, one of my biggest formative moments as I was getting into motion design was discovering this plugin called Particular. I don't know, anybody who's like used After Effects and loves particles will have used this plugin from Trapcode called Particular. And it's great, but as soon as you start getting anything that's slightly complicated, you can start to feel After Effects just chugging. You know what I mean? Each frame will start to take longer and longer, and then, I'd end up with projects where frames were taking 5 or 6 minutes. And when you're in a broadcast environment, you're trying to like get stuff out for broadcast that night, it just doesn't work. When I first opened up Unreal and one of the trainers from Unreal Australia introduced us to Niagara, which is the inbuilt particle system inside Unreal. And he was just pulling together really complex 3D particle systems and running at 60 frames per second to 100 frames per second. My jaw just dropped because all of this kind of stuff should not be happening in real time. I've seen it in other sort of little things like dedicated systems like Embergen and stuff like that, which has been piquing my interest. But I haven't seen anything as controllable as Particular being done in a complicated 3D setting like this at real time.
Ooh. Oh, and that was the big thing that's kind of really captured you about Unreal, is the amount of complex mathematical equations it can make to around the particle system, like say around Niagara, and the open architecture that they've actually constructed for you to be able to just plug and play things into it.
Yeah, yeah. I had my little stint in Houdini, and that really, appealed to my sense, which is like, okay, well, there's just data. We can take data, we can plug it into something else, whether it's just whatever channel, it can be plugged into another channel, and we can use this for that, and everything is open and connected. And being able to see that in a real-time kind of environment it's made trying to learn a new piece of software exciting again, which is that's a lot when you're our age. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
It's very hard to get excited about learning a new piece of software.
Yeah, yeah, but if you can find that new piece of software, because I think a lot about learning now, like software itself is a tool for getting a result. So if you can you can come up with the idea about what you want, you can usually find the tool to do it, and actually learning the tool is not the main part, especially at my age now. I can always find someone, if I know the name of what I want, I can usually find someone who knows what they're doing, and I can tell them I just want the result. So
Yeah.
that's my approach now to software, is like, I'm getting old, it takes me a lot longer to learn these things, but I know there's people in their mid-30s who have been dealing with it for 5-10 years, and they can just go boom, and it's going to be better than I can come up with anyways, and quicker. But yeah,
That's my personal journey as well. It's like from the days of like wanting things immediately, I dived into slower processes like Cinema 4D and trying to get really nice photoreal 3D results. And then I started moving back with GPU rendering and things starting to get faster. And I feel like Unreal's kind of that next step. It's like, okay, well, the iteration is back. The instant iteration of being able to see what I'm trying to do immediately, that's back now.
it's back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So I guess the next question, which we were talking about then, was once they Unreal kind of put out that they were running a competition as such, or they were putting together the screen. They'd teamed up with Screen Queensland or all of Screen Australia, and they're actually running a grant process throughout each different state. What point did you then go, you know what, I want to put together a pitch? And how did that evolve? How did your pitch evolve?
It's a bit of a multifaceted question. So there's so much going on at once, you know what I mean? So I'll stick with just me again. So
Yep.
for just me, this sort of popped up at a time that I was already looking into Unreal for some things at work, and it really just sort of stood out as something that could be something that I could tackle myself. Obviously, that's not how it ended up. It's my pitch wasn't just me, but at the same time, like this struck me as something that could take me back to my old roots of like a motion designer who basically can do everything.
Yeah. I mean, this is I think like that was when I was when I was looking at the pitch itself. It's like Well, it is something that they only wanted small teams on because the budget wasn't that large. So it was only going to be one or two people. And the scope of the project they were working for as well, which was great. It's like, only had to be 90 seconds to 5 minutes. So they weren't looking for anything big. And it was such an exciting I guess an exciting opportunity to be able to go, you know what, let's put together a pitch and actually see how it goes. And I think the actual process itself has been the most exciting part of going through, because I know a lot of people probably haven't pitched to Screen Queensland before. So actually going through that process, while it's very laborious and you've got to be very fastidious with dotting your I's, crossing your T's, but this particular one hasn't been that stringent with its requirements, which was exciting. So writing documentation is not my forte. I don't know how you go with that.
No, I don't do a terrible job at it, but it's not something that I seek out. You know what I mean? I'm not like, you know what, I'm going to write a grant today just because I feel like it. It's not my thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, how did you go then to going through the steps? How long did it take? If you don't mind talking about it, how long did it take you to work through that the actual pitch that you put forward?
I mean, hopefully people find this interesting. So, look, it was probably about less time than I should have dedicated to it. Look, getting the idea together, I probably spent the most time on. I probably spent about a week and a half to 2 weeks actually sort of making sure that the story matched the technology and also matched, what I thought could be achieved in the time frame, which is a very short 6 weeks. From there, though, then I really got into actually packaging it into an application for Screen Queensland. And at that point, I realized that they're probably not looking for something that is just me. And also being honest, I don't think I could achieve all of this just by myself. So I started looking for the right people. I pulled everybody together, and you have to go through all of these little steps, like getting everybody's bio and their headshot and putting that into a big document. And I think I'm giving you PTSD, just mentioning all these steps we have to go through. And, the late nights sort of just thinking, is this money actually worth it? Maybe I should just do it by myself. Maybe I should run away to, an island nation and just do it myself.
Yeah. That's the thing. You put your own propeller cap on, you go, look, I'll just do it myself. I like control like that as well. It's like, I'll just, you know what? I don't have enough hours in the day to do it myself, but I'd love to see this come together. All right, I just got to suck down my pride and go, you know what? There are definitely people who can make this come together. And the thing is, most people are really excited to get on a project because they're like, they like working with someone with experience, especially if you're new and you're just trying to get into the industry. It's great to get around people who have experience and actually can give them a bit of a leg up or give them a little bit of structure or form or something. And that's what I got really excited about with this particular project, is that they're exposing people to different people, to working with different people. So
I think that's the thing. I skipped over a bit of your question beforehand, but as a big picture, Unreal has always suffered from wanting to be in many different industries, but not being associated with them. So, they've always been that game sort of company. And even once you get into the higher sort of levels of visual effects or film production, people are so used to doing it a certain way that they won't have time to give something like Unreal a chance. By sort of just adding a little bit of incentive there, they've just gotten this groundswell of interest in places they wouldn't normally. So it's been really, really cool to see that sort of start to take shape.
I really got to give them credit as well for actually taking the initiative of going, well, we'll offer the free training courses as well, because I know a lot of people were on those free training courses that weren't going to do a pitch, but still they were getting the training as well. So I think, I'm really excited to see what projects get developed out of that. So
yeah, completely.
Well, thank you so much for actually sharing your wisdom, your journey, and your pathway with us, Luke. I really appreciate it. I know that some of my listeners are really going to enjoy it as well. So, everyone, if you want to find Luke, he definitely hit him up somewhere through the DLF list. You can find him on the DLF mailing list or the Facebook DLF pages. other than that, definitely check out where the work he's been doing at Pixel Zoo. You can find their website. I'll kind of have a link in the description down below. Leave me a like, say thank you, and subscribe to the channel for more conversations real soon. Until the next time, we'll say bye-bye.